Welcome back to Biotic World. In today's video, we are going to discuss one of the most fundamental components of any cell, the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is not just a boundary between the cell and its environment, it's an active participant in a multitude of processes that sustain life. From regulating the flow of molecules to facilitating communication between the cells, the plasma membrane plays an essential role in cellular function. Today, we will focus on its intricate structure and its diverse functions. Let's begin. The plasma membrane, also called the cell membrane, is the outermost layer of the cell. It serves as a selective barrier controlling what enters and exits the cell. Structurally, the plasma membrane is primarily composed of lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates. Let's break these components down one by one. At the core of the plasma membrane lies the phospholipid bilayer, which is formed by the lipid molecules that contain a hydrophilic head and two hydrophobic tails. Hydrophilic head. The head of the phospholipid is attracted to water and faces outward towards the aqueous environment, both inside and outside of the cell. Second is about the hydrophobic tails. The tails are repelled by water and face inward, away from the surrounding water, forming a hydrophobic core. This arrangement creates a double layer where the hydrophilic heads from the outer and inner surfaces of the membrane, while the hydrophobic tails create an interior barrier that restricts the movement of water-soluble molecules. This bilayer is crucial for the semi-permeable nature of the plasma membrane, allowing it to control the passage of materials. The plasma membrane is not a static structure, it is embedded with a variety of proteins that perform essential functions. These are two main types of membrane proteins: integral and peripheral proteins. Integral proteins. These proteins span the entire membrane. They are embedded within the phospholipid bilayer and often act as transport channels, allowing molecules to pass through the membrane. Some are also receptors involved in signal transduction. We will discuss this later. Peripheral proteins. These proteins are associated with the inner or outer surface of the membrane, often attached to integral proteins or the phospholipids themselves. Peripheral proteins have roles in cell signaling, maintaining the cell's shape, and helping with cell adhesion. Cholesterol molecules are interspaced within the phospholipid bilayer, helping to maintain membrane fluidity. Cholesterol acts as a stabilizer by preventing the membrane from becoming too rigid at lower temperature and too fluid at higher temperatures. This helps the membrane maintain its structural integrity under varying conditions. On the outer surface of the plasma membrane, carbohydrates are often attached to proteins or lipids, forming glycoproteins and glycolipids. These carbohydrate chains serve important roles in cell-cell recognition, which allow the cells to identify and interact with each other. They are also involved in immune responses, as the body uses these markers to distinguish between self and non-self cells. One of the primary functions of the plasma membrane is its selective permeability. This means the membrane controls the entry and exit of the substances, allowing only certain molecules to pass through while blocking others. The movement of substances across the membrane can be passive, no energy required, or active, requiring energy. Let's break this down into more detail. Passive transport. In passive transport, molecules move down their concentration gradient from areas of high concentration to low concentration without the need of energy. Simple diffusion. Small non-polar molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse freely through the lipid bilayer. Facilitated diffusion. Larger or polar molecules such as glucose and ions require transport proteins to facilitate their movement across the membrane. These proteins form channels or carriers that allows the molecule to pass through the membrane. Osmosis. The diffusion of water across the membrane through special channels called aquaporins. Water moves from areas of lower solute concentration to higher solute concentration. Next is active transport. Active transport requires energy, usually in the form of ATP, because molecules are moved against their concentration gradient from low to higher concentration. Sodium potassium pump. This pump actively transports sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions into the cell. This is essential for maintaining the resting membrane potential of the cell and important for nerve and muscle function. Endocytosis and exocytosis. Large molecules or particles that cannot pass through the membrane are engulfed in vesicles. In process called endocytosis, cell takes in materials, and exocytosis, cell expels material. Plasma membrane is involved in cell signaling, allowing cells to respond to changes in their environment. Membrane-bound receptors play a crucial role in this process. Signal reception. Receptors on the membrane surface bind to signaling molecules like hormones or neurotransmitters. When these signaling molecules bind to a receptor, they trigger a series of intracellular events, often involving secondary messengers like cyclic AMP or calcium ions, which amplify the signal inside the cell. There are several types of receptors like G protein coupled receptor, or also known as the GPCRs. These receptors are involved in a wide range of physiological processes from site to immune response. When activated, they trigger an intracellular signaling cascade through a G protein, leading to cellular responses. Next is the tyrosine kinase receptors. These receptors are involved in growth and differentiation. They transfer phosphate group to tyrosine residues on intracellular proteins to activate signaling pathway. Next is the receptor-mediated endocytosis. Specific molecules such as LDL, low-density lipoprotein, are internalized by the cell when they bind to receptors on the membrane. This process helps the cell take in necessary materials without consuming excessive energy. The plasma membrane plays an important role in maintaining the shape and mechanical stability of the cell. This is achieved by interactions between membrane protein and the cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton linkage. The actin filament of the cytoskeleton are attached to peripheral membrane proteins, helping to maintain the shell shape and mechanical stability. These proteins allow the cell to resist deformation and participate in cell movement. Cell-to-cell adhesion. The plasma membrane contains adhesion molecules like cadherin and integrins that help cells stick together to form tissues. This is essential for the integrity of multicellular organisms. The plasma membrane also maintains some membrane potential, which is critical for the function of neurons and muscle cells. Resting membrane potential. The difference in charge across the membrane is maintained by the movement of ions, particularly sodium ion and potassium ion, via ion channels and the pumps. This difference in charge allows the cell to respond to stimuli such as during the conduction of nerve impulses. Next is about the action potential. In excitable cells like neurons and muscle cells, changes in membrane potential lead to the propagation of a action potential, which is the electrical signal that travels along the length of the cell. The plasma membrane is not a rigid structure, it must remain fluid to function effectively. This fluidity is influenced by several factors. Temperature. Higher temperatures increase membrane fluidity, while lower temperatures decrease it. Next is the fatty acid composition. The presence of unsaturated fatty acids in the phospholipids increase fluidity by preventing tight packing. Next is the cholesterol. Cholesterol embedded within the bilayer stabilizes the membrane by preventing it from becoming too rigid at lower temperatures and too fluid at higher temperatures. In conclusion, the plasma membrane is a dynamic and multifunctional structure. Its selective permeability, ability to facilitate cell signaling, and role in maintaining cell integrity are all crucial for the survival and the function of the cell. Without the plasma membrane's regulation of what enters and exits the cell could not maintain homeostasis. or respond to its environment effectively. Likewise, the plasma membrane's involvement in communication allows cells to coordinate their activities, making it an essential player in processes like growth, immune responses, and tissue formation. To summarize, we covered the plasma membrane's basic structure, which is built from lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates, and how each of these components contribute to its function. We looked at the phospholipid bilayer, which forms the foundation of the membrane, and integral and peripheral proteins that serve as channels, receptors, and structural components, and the role of cholesterol and carbohydrate in modulating membrane properties. We also explored how the plasma membrane regulates molecular transport, supports cell signaling, and maintains structural integrity, and plays a key role in electrical excitability. I hope this deep dive into the structure and function of the plasma membrane has helped you understand its complexity and importance. Understanding the plasma membrane is foundational to learning how cells interact with the environment, communicate with each other, and maintain their internal balance. It's one of the key aspects of biology that influences all cellular activities. Thank you for joining me today on this exploration of the plasma membrane. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you won't miss out on our future content. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or there is anything specific you would like to learn more about. Also, feel free to share this video with your fellow biology enthusiasts. Until next time, keep exploring the wonders of life here on Biotic World.